Dos projetos que todo mundo conhece, aos que todo mundo precisa conhecer, é valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Dizer que o Brasil é gigante não é nenhum exagero, mas um país desse tamanho não se move sozinho. Ele conta com mais de 200 milhões de gigantes, como eu e você. Gigantes que saem cedo de casa todos os dias, com força, dedicação, coragem, pelos trilhos, estradas ou aeroportos. Gigantes que não diminuem diante dos desafios, que não têm medo de distâncias, nem do longo caminho até os sonhos acontecerem. Por isso, só uma gigante como a CCR poderia estar ao lado dos brasileiros no desafio de mover este país. CCR 25 anos. Mover o Brasil é para gigantes.
Estamos de volta. Flup não para.
Baba. Ih, não tá chegando.
Me emocionando, bebendo nessa fonte maravilhosa com Gabi, Tia
Agora foi.
So, talking about delicious, now it's not going to be less delicious. I'm going to start the panel To Eat is a Political Act, Increasing the Revolution. From the many ways to feed an ori, through what we eat or what we think, surely Bela Gil, Creuza Oliveira, and Audrey Pulvar will understand. Roll of applause to these three wonderful women. Bela Gil, who brings in freedom the reason for living. She's a chef, presenter, writer, or who is going to prepare this food, where she discusses the slavery root of the devaluation of cooking, a real revolutionary in the promotion of the sustainable eating. She's going to share this panel with the union activist that was mentioned by Tiama, honored by Tiama, Creuza Oliveira, one of the most important leaders in the struggle for the domestic workers. Please, you choose the chair, your throne. So one of the most important leaders in this movement, created of the National Federation of the Domestic Workers in Bahia, and the first domestic worker to receive the title of Doutor Honoris Causa in Brazil. Sorry, Audrey Pulvar, ecofeminist, from Martinica, journalist, author of many books, ambientalist, Vice Mayor of Paris, responsible for the agriculture and sustainable eating. One of the most known black faces in France. To mediate this strong panel, Rokhaya Jamour, one of the most important activists in France, journalist, movie maker, screenwriter, collaborator of the edition of The Guardian. Occupy your places, incredible women. The time has arrived. Eating is a political act. An excellent panel to all of you.
Très heureuse d'honorer compagnie aujourd'hui à ces trois femmes incroyables qui ont des parcours.
Bom dia. It's very complementary, this topic, and that above all we have interest in how we feed ourselves and the care that we have to have regarding the patriarchal colonization. Everything's fine with the translation? You can hear me? Yes? Okay, perfect. So today we are going to talk on how to take care of ourselves, and that is up to women in the way how societies are organized to depend strongly of black women, but also in great part is permeated in French history, since we are here French and Brazilian, but also the issue of their agricultural justice, access to healthy eating. So I'd like to start by bringing a question to all of you. I would like to understand what brought you to the professions you perform today. What led you to the activism, to the union activism, to the eating, to the food, agriculture sector, and to the cooking and TV. I don't know which one would like to start. So, to talk a little bit about your trajectory, and you tell us a little bit about your work and as a domestic that took you to your work in the university. It's a great pleasure to be here composing this panel with these powerful women. And also, I like to thank the audience. I started my activism in '84. I am a domestic worker. I started working as a domestic worker when I was 10 years old. And I never accepted the conditions, the working conditions, those bad working conditions, terrible ones, without a salary, without a boss, without Sundays. And I decided to study. The idea when I went to the capital city was to study, was to take care of the child and also study. But this didn't happen. I just went to school and learned how to read and write when I was 16 years old. So today I'm retired. I know many women and men today have difficulties to retire, but I had this privilege to retire. But I don't retire from the struggle. So I started my activism in '84, participating of the Black movement and the group of domestic workers in Bahia, where I'm from. And I started participating of this group of domestic workers, and then we created the association in 1985. We created the association in '86 because before we couldn't organize ourselves in unions because the legislation didn't allow us to be organized in unions. So it's important to say that the struggle of the domestic workers has around 100 years. The first association was founded in 1936 by Dona Laudelina Santos Melo, a great warrior that was certainly a woman ahead of her time. Dona Laudelina founded the first association. Dona Laudelina talked with the ministers of Getúlio Vargas when it was created the CLT, the constitution that regulates the labor in Brazil. She went there and talked to Getúlio Vargas, the president, to extend the rights of the workers to the domestic workers, and this didn't happen. In '72, we managed to have the first legislation for the domestic workers. More than 50 years of labor being registered. But 70% is not registered because, of course, that the bosses, they don't respect the legislation. The work givers, they do not respect the legislation. So we have this issue of gender, class, and race. because when we arrive here in Brazil, the majority of the domestic workers are black women that don't know how to read or write. Many that got to my age didn't even go to school. Today, it got better. Nowadays, we have domestic workers that are graduated in law, in pedagogy, still working in the domestic field. But first, our signature was our thumb. But we managed to have our right recognized partially in 72, and then in 2013, during Lula and Dilma's government, we have the Pact of the Domestic Workers and the Act 150. And we managed to have an international convention, 189, and we managed to have President Lula sanctioning this convention, but it's not yet recognized by the courts, the labor courts. So we have the three powers, the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive. So it's not easy to respect this legislation because we have all the traces of the slavery works. When blacks were brought from Africa, trafficked from Africa to Brazil for a forced labor. So without, of course, any kind of remuneration. So, you know, Brazilians, that there are stories of domestic workers. They are rescued from enslaved work, not similar to enslaved work, but really enslaved work. Some women, black women, being rescued from these houses where she works for 60 years. They lost contact with the family, lost their identity. So it's an unequal struggle. Because I always say that the three powers, of course, give work to us, but also to the unionists, to the feminists. So many times the ones that fight for the right forget that there is a worker inside their houses working without having their rights. So our struggle also here in Rio and the union, they know that it's not easy to be a house worker, to work outside, to take care of ourselves, take care of the family. And when we say, I don't know, yes, we are here. We don't know how many minutes you have. Just feel comfortable. Continue. So we have this concern because we left our houses to take care of the children of other women, while ours, we don't have anyone to take care of because there are no public policies of elementary schools, kindergarten schools, or integral time schools, the whole day, full day school, because of course, the domestics, they are taking care of the other people's children, but they need someone. So it's the oldest daughter or the oldest sister. It's the neighbor, the mother. So everything that we have is public. So the public school, we know how it is. There's the first class, the second you don't have, the third you don't have. So the child that didn't have the second class, they just go to the streets. And these children are there for the traffic dealers, the abusers that will take these children to start leading them to the use of drugs or to be what we call the transporter of drugs. So this adolescent is involved, this child, this adolescent is involved in the situation of the drug trafficking, and they are the greatest victim of the extermination groups, of the police, that think that the situation requests killing. So our black youngsters are being killed all the time because of the lack of this politics. School, full day school. It's the issue of the care. And today we are discussing this politics of the care. It's a word politics. We take care of the other people's children, other people's house, but who takes care of us? Who takes care of our children, of our elders? So today, the National Federation, during the pandemics, made a campaign. Take care of who takes care of you. That was the domestic workers wouldn't go to work. They should stay at their houses, but they were forced to go to work, and many of them would stay, went back home only once a week, and their children. So they made this campaign to take care of who takes care of you. Many died of COVID, was killed because of COVID. But the ones, of course, who the bosses that were in the private health system could pay for the treatment, but the domestic workers, no. So I don't know if you know the case of Mirtes, who worked for Dona Sari, where she worked for this family, and she had Miguel, that during the pandemics, she would go to work, and she brought Miguel to work because during the pandemics, of course, the kindergartens closed, the schools closed. So she brought her kid because she didn't have the liberation to stay at home. So what happened when we discussed this of taking care of or who takes care of you? So what happened? Mirtes got to work, went out to walk the dog of the boss, and left Miguel with the woman, with her boss, while she was walking the patron's dog. But Dona Sari didn't have patience to stay with Miguel. So she took Miguel and put in the elevator. And Miguel went up instead of down to the 9th floor. And there he fell. He fell down and died. But what caught my attention was that when Mirtes perceives that there was an accident, she came in a desperate way to see what happened. And when she got there, she saw that it was Mirtes saw that it was her son that was there dead. But in no moment she left the dog alone. In no moment she left the dog. That's what we are talking about, of taking care. Not even at this moment, but her boss left her kid alone. So that's what we are talking about. The domestic work in Brazil. Official data talks about 6 million, but we know there are more than that in Brazil. In the whole world, we have the domestic workers, even in the first world countries, because I saw some situations of domestic workers in Germany, in many spaces in Geneva, where these women were there. They would come from the poor countries to go to these first world countries working as domestic. And my activism that starts in 94 was for the defense and valorization of the domestic work, because it has a social value that nobody understands. Only when the clothes are dirty, when food is not prepared, when the bosses cannot go to work because they don't have who to leave the children with. And we know very well that this work contributes for the world economy, for the Brazilian economy. But they still say, no, domestic work doesn't generate profit to the boss. We generate health. education, cleaning, well-being, and replace the working force of any other domestic work that leaves the house in the hands of somebody that takes care of everything. So, when we say, were the domestic workers that contributed to the emancipation of the non-black women? Why were the domestic workers? Because they stayed home, taking care of the boss's children while she was studying, graduating at the university, working outside. So the domestic workers contributed for the emancipation of these other women. So more than 100 years of union organization. During this period of the union organization, we managed to have our labor rights in 88 in the constitution, new constitution, and with the PAC in 2013, with the convention 89. And we're still fighting. But now, what concerns us most, Bela and my dear, is that after so many years, we achieving our rights, fighting for our rights, they invent the MEI, individual micro entrepreneurship. They want to transform the domestic workers in MEI. Domestic workers are not MEI. It's not a micro entrepreneur. She's a worker that is part of a category that sells the working force to somebody. Domestic workers cannot be made. It's a way to go turn around the legislation and once more force these workers without security and rights, because it's always like this.
This is worse when it comes to domestic work. From the moment we can go on and advance in law, they invent something to, bypass law and not comply with it. And we're here, the Sonia's case. Who knows about Sonia Maria from Santa Catarina? Who knows? If you don't, I will tell you. Sonia Maria, a domestic worker who was taken from São Paulo to Santa Catarina at the age of 9 and was rescued now with 53. She was rescued now from the house of a judge. And Sonia was deaf, never learned the sign language, never had a contract, never had her rights guaranteed. She has health conditions, and this judge enslaved her. This was a slavery. This audit official rescued her, and this judge, together with other courts, was achieved to take her back to the house to be a slave again. There was a national campaign called Sonia Livre, and now at FENATRAD are fighting together with other social movements. And I want to ask you, if you were here from social movements or not, for you to, work with us in this campaign, Sonia Livre, because it's not possible that our justice will, do this, be so unrespectful with the Black woman that worked. Muito obrigada. Thank you for talking about this, but now what you have to do is very important. We're going to go back to it, but now in this moment we need to pass the floor to other people. Don't worry. We're going to have all the time to move on with what you have to say now. This genealogy you spoke about now about slavery, and please leave the mic here with you now. and the Black women oppression, the current condition of the domestic workers, all of these issue with laws that individualize the contracts instead of guaranteeing the rights. This is something we're going to address because it always also happens in France. But this prevents people from accessing their rights. And I want to talk with Bella and Audrey about this care and food security and quality of food. Who would like to start? Please, Bella first. I can answer. Hello, good afternoon. Let me get this phone out. So I'm still recovering from Creuza's speech. It's so moving and incredible. It's an issue that I have been working on for some years because you cannot talk about healthy food and democratization of healthy food without talking about the democratization of land, because our food comes from land and we need agriculture reform, land reform, so that we can put food in people's healthy food in people's plates. But we should not forget that we have to value to who prepares and cooks our food. We use the term true food, you know, and I like to use the expression food of pot, you know, because it's real. Food of pan, because it makes it real now, gives you the real dimension of the food. And we can only access this plain access to healthy food and food of quality to everyone when we start to value this work. Since the cookers inside and outside, starting with them and in the restaurants and cookers and etc. So Bringy, talking about your question, recently, 5 years ago at least, I started to understand that we cannot speak about healthy food without addressing domestic work and non-remunerated domestic work, because 70% of the deaths in Brazil are due to chronic conditions, non-transmissible, cancer, diabetes, obesity, heart conditions. And I'm not saying this. Literature shows that real food or pan food is a way to prevent these things to happen. We live in a paradox now because we still have 8 million people in a hunger situation, and at the same time 57,000 people die per year because they are consuming ultra processed food. So pan food saves your life, but it's really demanding to cook. You know, you have to buy, you have to wash, you have to cook, and then wash it over again. So it's an unfair dispute. We have to fight a lot to put pan food and ultra processed at the same level, because we know the reality of the majority of our people in our country, with women working in 2 or 3 jobs, you know, and take 2 hours in a bus to go and come back, and they arrive in their houses and have to prepare food for family. But it's easier to open a box of, you know, cookies and give to the kids. And one of the mistakes that I usually make sometimes is to victimize and give the blame to individuals for a problem that they did not create. We are talking about, you know, the theme of this panel. Eating is a political act, but it's only a political act when we have the opportunity to choose, when we can choose what to eat. If I can choose an organic food, if I can cook at home with my pan, this is wonderful. But who are the people who have this option? We live in a society where industry says to the population how much and how they are going to prepare any of their foods. So we have to, retrieve and resume this autonomy and this independence from the land to the kitchen, to the pan, and to the plate. And bringing a bit of what Creuza was saying about domestic economy, the economy of the domestic work. First of all, none other work is possible without the domestic work. No one's gonna come out of their houses with their houses dirty, clothes dirty. It's a work that sustains life. We need this work to survive, but it is put in an invisible place and purpose, and it's not remunerated in purpose to make the capitalist machine work. So because what does some other do during the first 18 years of their kids? They are creating the best good of capitalism, the workforce. So this person arrives to the 18, 20 years old and goes to the market because someone, raised this kid that becomes a man that goes to the market. And we need to recognize this work. We need to value and redistribute, and in my vision, remunerate this work, because this is a work that generates 11 trillions of dollars to the world economy. We produce 13% of the world GDP. So when we talk about remuneration, it's in a utopia. We produce this money. It has been already counted, but it has to go back to the hands of who works. So it's not a huge utopia. We can make this come true, because in my vision is the most effective way that we have to obtain justice, race, gender, class justice, because this work is done by Black women, poor Black women, in its majority. So we cannot talk about healthy food and democratization of healthy food if we don't talk about the importance of caring. Because if you want a healthy population, eating well, living well, with all the effort we have to put to maintain, sustain life, this work, this domestic work, has to be recognized. So my vision, one of my last books is about this. It's about this domestic work and healthy food. So I invite you, since we are in a literary fair, I invite you to read this book of mine. It brings this theme in a very deep way, and at the same way very, smooth. And it should start talking about it, putting this economy of care, in place. Me and Creuza, we've met before in the release of the national care policies. And we are in a certain ways advancing, but population needs to know what it is and how much it's worth, and why do we need to distribute and remunerate this work. So I'm gonna conclude here for us to, be able to talk a little bit more about food. Thank you. Thank you, Bela. Thank you. You talk about domestic exploration, which is a theme used by many feminists, and it's necessary to add up a very mental load with all of the psychological organization that is not counted, and it has to do with national and international economies. He said that if one part of these women, when you talk about liberation of these women, many of them were in a very precarious situation and they were discriminated. So they live in this precarious administrative situation, even abroad. There is a person called Raquel Keke, which is a syndicate leader who work with these domestic workers in hotels. And this would be an opportunity to bring this person and make this transition with what Creuza said before. She were the first Black woman to present the Journal National in France, and you were so much seen in France, in this news program, and now you work in the City Hall in Paris with agriculture, and you switched from journalism to activism. So I'd like you to say something about your experience. Good afternoon to everyone. Sorry, I don't speak English. I will speak French. So, first of all, I'm gonna deviate a little bit from what you were saying before to speak again about this problem of headphones. It's not the first time I come here, and this problem, these headphones are not fit for a Black woman's hair. They are not fit for Brazilian women. Many Black Brazilian women and Black men, Brazilian Black men. So how do I use, a motorcycle helmet? How do I use a bicycle helmet? So obviously, we always find a solution. But nowadays, I have my Afro hair. Sometimes I make braids. Of course, I can adapt, but I know I brush my hair. Sometimes I straighten it, and sometimes these headphones are okay. They fit, but I'm saying this not only in a very anecdotic way, but this theme is very present in the kitchens where women who cook, and I am an advisor in terms of food. And a good part of my program, when it comes to schools and kindergartens and houses and events, solidarity restaurants, bringing this food with accessible prices for people in a precarious situation, and also with a very with access, help for people who are in the streets, for homelesses. And sometimes it happens to me several times during the weeks, for a week in France and abroad. I've been here in Rio to talk about sustainable food, and I could visit some kitchens, some canteens in Maricá, in Rio, and many spaces like this with these issues, with a lot of Black women. At least 20% have this, Afro hair with a lot of volume. And you have these, these caps that are used in kitchen. They are not adapted to Black women's hair, so these, curly, extreme curly hair, you have to adapt. You try to adapt it and try to move these caps around, to fit. And all this adaptation of your daily life and trying to fit it in the reality of those who need to work with kitchen and out of the African continent, Brazil has the biggest black population. So there are several ways of being black in terms of colors of the skin, and value these hair, give value to the hair. So this aesthetic has to do with food too. So to answer your question, I am a journalist since 1993, and I studied in Paris, and I went to Martinique, and then I came back to Paris in 2002, and in 2004 I was the first black woman to have a program, a show in TV and a journal in TV, in the very big media. Maybe I think you were the first black woman, in fact, the first black person for a media with such a huge audience. Because maybe before it existed, I worked in Martinique, and we were also very black there in Martinique, of course, but in France, with 6 million of inhabitants, so having a black woman working at 9:30 p.m. in the night show in the most important channels of the country, we have between 6 to 8 million of people watching our show at now, and this was a very important moment for me, and I consider this as a very special and important moment. When I came back from Martinique, and then I went to Paris, we were, I didn't want to be a black journalist. I wanted to be a journalist. I am a black woman. I assume this. I accept this. I'm a black woman, but this is a reality. But I want to be judged by my qualities as a journalist. And once they gave me this occasion of, presenting effectively this news program, and they gave me this opportunity, I had to undergo this exam. I have been working for almost 10 years in Martinique. I spent 2 years working in a metropolitan France. And at a certain point, people said, but we're going to assume the risk to put a black woman in the show. And in France, there are many black women, not only white women or well-dressed women that drink coffee in their terraces of restaurants and smoke their cigarettes, more complex than that. And then in 2004, I started to work. It was a very important moment in my career, and I, started to enter this collective imaginary in France, and I think that I interviewed 250 people in some multinational media everywhere. Said, oh my God, a black woman in TV presenting a news. And yes, I was taking it seriously because I want to be judged as a journalist, but I didn't know to which extent this symbol could be important. So not only I had this to do this exam, and I have to prove things to people 6-10 times more than other women. And the people said, we have to assume this risk, I just wanted some sort of pressure. I would say, no, I can't, make those people embarrassed, because those people are seeing me and saying, maybe we can get there too. And I was born in a very militant family, an activist family, really commitment with the left wing. My parents, both of them, I prefer to speak more about my family because my father was an extraordinary man in his activism, but in terms of particular side, he committed crimes that are, unforgivable. My father was really engaged politically, but my mother, mother's family, all women, or most women were activists. My mother was a social assistant for years, and she was really, in this thing of taking care of people. We had young people coming to our houses, staying there for months before going back to their families. So they were there, recreating, rebuilding their lives, and this was natural for me. So I was really, I grew up as a feminist. I was educated as a feminist, so I was always hearing my mother, my aunt, all my older sisters saying that I could only count on myself to go on my way, that I had to be free, that I could not count on any man for my happiness, to guarantee my food, the food on a plate, on the table. And this was natural for me to commit myself to the other and dedicate myself to the other. And this journalism was seen through this lens, not as a political idea, but an idea to take voices, to show things that people didn't want to see. I've been a journalist for 25 years. Until 2014, I worked for 17 different media. I worked a lot in TV, but I also wrote, also radio. And when you're working 25 years and during more than 20 years, you're there every night on TV, we're talking about big political issues. Of course, this, leaves a mark in people, whether they like you or not. And that made so that I became famous in France. And throughout the career, I was so committed. That's why I met Gaia in this struggle, this fight for affirmation of Black people. And I was always saying, we are not vindicated. We have to move on to the phase of affirmation. We are here. We are here. We cannot do it without us. So I was a journalist. I was trying to be neutral as a journalist, but I was defending the equal principles, principles of justice and equality. And at that time, not so long ago, until 2017, and at that time, it was considered, a very transversal term in political terms. Everyone from the left or right wing were in favor or against. They were in favor of equality and against racism. So it was possible to be a generalist, not assuming the party, but defending these big things. Nowadays, it's not possible. In France,
we can be anti-LGBT. And in 2017, I'm going to conclude. It happened two things. First, I had the sensation that this work of a journalist had changed. I didn't identify. I didn't want to get an old journalist saying, oh, it was better before. And after that, we had the elections in France. And the greatest TV, the greatest channel that had the political participation received Marie Le Pen, the extreme right candidate, and also Patrick Buisson, that was even more in the right wing than Marie. So I remember that I was in my house, and I thought, this situation is so complicated in France that the extreme right discusses with the extreme right. It has been so normalized, racism, discrimination, hate. It's so normalized. And to contradict the extreme right, we invite an even more extreme right candidate. So I think that we have to pass to another kind of commitment. And I committed myself against the extreme right. I quitted my job. And what I extracted as an impression of this 2017 episode, the extreme right almost got the power is that there was an agreement between the extreme right vote and the consequences of the climate changes. So the populations, the more exposed populations to the consequences of the climate change, and that felt more vulnerable, not understood, and not included in the debate, they turned to the extreme right. And the extreme right is not ecologist, it's racist, xenophobic, and misogynist, and the extreme right, I say also in Paris, this refuses to be called extreme right. And when you say that, you are going to be persecuted by the justice. If you go to a debate in France, Paris, etc., and you're going to say that the Sombra is of extreme right, they open a denounce. They place a denounce. No, we are not extreme right, but it is extreme right. It's a racist project for the French society. So 2017, I had this comprehension of the situation, and I decided to get involved in a free way in the combat of the effects of the global warming, with the idea that to fight against climate change, it was above all a matter of social justice, because in Brazil, in France, anywhere, people, the most vulnerable ones, the most modest, that live in precarious conditions, are the ones that emit less pollution, and they are not the ones that make the decisions. So I decided to do it. That was very important. And so the ex-president of the ZONG, that was minister, even of the government, no, it wasn't the same government, but the president of this NGO that was minister while I was president of the foundation asked to quit and wanted to go back to this NGO. And he said, no, you don't have to quit. We can be directors, two directors, but at the same time, he was accused of a lot of sexual aggressions. Yeah. So he said, it's your foundation, it's your right to come back, but I don't want to work in these conditions. So I left this foundation in 2019 with many projects, and the political context made me think. And the mayor in Paris contacted me, and she said, we have elections in 2020. I need you in Paris. We need a woman of the left wing that want to work with the ecologist issue, a black woman. So we made this campaign. We were elected, and she gave me this responsibility. And I really want to talk about this issue of the sustainable eating because it's a way of social justice, to have access, to know how to eat in a sustainable way. Is also an issue that is part of the social justice and of giving instruments to people. So it's also a political issue. And I think that the policies, I don't know if I have time, I don't know if I can talk about it, but the policies to which we commit on behalf of the mayor in Paris to have sustainable eating accessible in general for the poorest ones is a political choice. Because what is the sustainable or organic eating? It's an eating, it's a food that comes from a sustainable agriculture. In Brazil, promoted by the MST, right? The movement of the No Lands movement. So I could come with my cap, but my cap is not well with my hairstyle now. But this sustainable agriculture is an agriculture that takes care of the land. It's an agriculture that takes care of the ecosystems, of the quality of the land, of the water resources. It's an agriculture that creates islands of preservation of biodiversity. It's an agriculture that leads to a just sharing of the value. Okay, the workers, the field workers, they have the right to a decent salary. And in France, we have many agricultural workers that are in the system. And so this agriculture that takes care of the nature, that preserves the salary and the rights of the field workers, and that at the same time preserves the health of everybody, and that above all, let's not forget, it's more tasty because it has the sanitary aspect, but also the flavor. This agriculture that produces sustainable eating. And also to have people working in a sustainable agriculture without pesticides, with more random actions. This has, of course, actions of planting and everything. Of course, it costs more. And it's normal to cost more. What is not normal is not to make you believe in the last 60 years that we can pay, that we can eat through paying nothing. So to buy food of terrible quality, to eat badly but take part of a system that it's unequal for the workers, the agricultural workers. So together with the mayor in Paris, what we are trying to say is that if people that are in this precarious condition of great exclusion, the poorer families, they don't have a way to pay the just price for the sustainable agriculture, it's the collectivity and the public power that has to take care of this. I'm not going to detail how to do it, but we decided to use the political power, the political action, to make people that has a modest income to have access to a sustainable eating, knowing that the field workers that produce this kind of food receive a just salary for their work.
Suivre l'entretien, le questionnaire, je voulais juste quand même revenir.
Before we continue this conversation, I'd like to go back to the point that you said we met each other when you were a journalist. And with your engagement, I would like to say that I had a very small organization at the time, and you supported us, and you were a very determined person for our visibility. So in my trajectory, you gave a visibility, and this was very important to remember, that you, in the moment in which you were having a lot of visibility, you used this moment to give visibility to the ones that didn't have. This is a very important point. She really deserves the applause. There is something very important and interesting that you said regarding the cost of the eating, of the healthy eating. I'm the daughter of immigrants. My mother was from Senegal. And from my childhood, I remember I never consumed industrialized products in my house. We ate industrialized products in my school restaurant, but at home, they were fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. So I am the daughter of a factory worker, and it usually competes with the work because they need to have time to participate of the capitalism. So it's difficult to have a healthy eating because they have to be rapid, fast in everything. So the contradiction of the industrialized food, right? It's important to think about this knowledge that were lost because we know how to eat in a healthy way. But this knowledge is being lost because we lost material goods to be transmitted So it's very important to have access to these material goods to transmit. In a cheaper way, it's easier to have access to this cheaper food. But the idea is to be able to access more expensive products. It's still expensive, but investing time and investing work, we can give more access to these products. So how do you deal with this issue of our grandmothers and our mothers that cooked in a not so costful way? We don't have too much time, but let's try to respond in a shorter. Bela, how do you work with it? I think it would be nice for you to start, and then we give the floor to Audrey and Adrisa and Creuza. Well, I have so many.
I'd be hours here discussing, but I want to, go through some points briefly because you brought now, this issue of edgery, giving visibility to your organization, your work, and a reference that we have, and I think it's important to differentiate black and white feminism and bring something of what Creuza says and logic when we have white feminism and people going out working, women going out of work, but the oppression is still there because for women, white women to become CEO and entrepreneurs, exploration was needed and was present in the hands of black women. So I think that this example illustrates a lot the black sorority, of not leaving any other behind and walk together. I think it's important to say this. And well, another thing that Audrey said about feeding, and since you are in politics, I think it's necessary for us to say and reaffirm. It's something that Josué de Castro said, a very important geologist in terms of food. And he used to say that hunger is not a technical issue, it's a political issue. Because we have all the solutions and tools to put quality food in the plates of everyone and in everyone's houses. We lack political will. Because you were there trying to change France's way of feeding. And it's just really important and immense. And when Brazil had this government whose priority was to get Brazil out of hunger, and we managed to do it. We took it from the hunger map, but now it is back again there. And the last thing, well, I have several other issues to address. Yeah, we need another panel, but it's fast. The aesthetic side, I think it's really interesting what you said about the hair, and it makes so that aesthetic becomes something political. Because when you talk about healthy food and healthy feeding, people have this aesthetic prejudice against not only organic and agricultural products that are out of the standard. Fruits are, smaller, not necessarily, but there's this thing. And also I work a lot with whole grain food, brown sugar instead of refined sugar and so on. And I think it's interesting to think about it. And the term, the white flour that we call here refined flour in Brazil, brings this meaning that it is superior, it's sophisticated, it's refined, people like it, it's delicious, tastes better. And we were raised to like this white aesthetics, that white flour. And the whole grain flour makes things, rustic and darker and less appealable to people. People don't usually like, when I sweeten a juice with brown sugar, people say like, I want the refined, I want the white sugar, the aesthetically, white sugar. I think it looks like I'm saying so many abstract things, but it isn't. The white is the refined, and the brown is not so sophisticated and refined. So there are so many other things that I needed to say about feeding and democratization. I think Audrey is really correct when she says about the importance of feeding in transforming the environment. We should use food as a tool to transform the environment. We can mitigate climate change if we revisit and change the way we produce, distribute, consume, and discharge food. This is really important. 45% of the emissions of gases in Brazil come from the food system, the way we consume and discharge our food and distribute it as well. And it's important for us to see it and revisit it. And she also talked about this change of mentality, that we need to have in our country. And because when an ultra-processed food arrives at a very lower cost in supermarket, we forget that we are paying. We forget about the externalities, to use a very technical term. The externalities are all those effects and impacts that we don't see, but are there. They use the soil poisoning, the pollution in the water, the impacts in our health, what we have to spend in terms of health and medicines and loss of productivity and so on. This food is cheap in the supermarket, but the ones who pay the true price of this production are us, the environment, the exploration of Mother Nature, and the exploration of our body, of our lives. I forgot, Mokai, the question you posed to me. The question was about the way you can look for resources in the past from practices of the past that were eradicated in the industrial world, current world, and how can we reinsert them for the next generations? Well, in a very objective way, we need time. We need to resume time, retrieve time in our lives, because no one can use mandioca and flour if they don't have time for that. You cannot cook a tomato sauce that takes 5 hours in your pan if you don't have time for that. You cannot go back to cook your bread in your house if you don't have time. So we need to rescue, retrieve time. And how do you do it? One of the possibilities is to reduce the work journey. And we hear, 6 per one is not okay. And a remuneration of the domestic work. These are, for instance, 2 ways to do it. And the third one, and Audrey is doing in France, and we in Brazil have already a policy in control to do it. The national program for schooling feeding, taking quality foods to school. And if I know that my son is at school eating foods of quality with traditional knowledge, cooked by workers that have their work valued and recognized in a very dignified way, I am okay, and I will have more time to maybe rescue these recipes and traditions. So redistribute domestic work beyond beyond the fact that only women cook in their houses is fundamental. So we need more kindergartens, more popular restaurants, more solidarity kitchens, community laundries, and so on. We need domestic work will come out, leave this domestic environment and goes to the collective environment. This is how we can rescue time and rescue all these tradition and recipes that keep sustain our health and the environment. You will do like Audrey and go to politics?
I don't know if you know, but I was called to be
for healthy feeding, but I could not accept. And yes, I believe that we can only change feeding today in Brazil because we have a structural problem through politics, public policies, and not necessarily. I don't have to be necessarily, institutionally there in politics, but as a communicator, activist, we're here talking about it, and I already think that this is, I am a voice, to add up to this and achieve these objectives. Creuza, you evoked you spoke about a woman who was so much concerned about caring their bosses that she could not guarantee proper care for her kid who died, and it has to do with preservation of life and daily care. Can you elaborate on women that, due to their professional obligations, could not take care of their own life? And the fact that this is even more difficult nowadays. Do you have proposals for this to change? What would you suggest to generate effective changes so that they can take care of themselves, because they cannot, take care of everyone. They need to take care of themselves and of the younger ones. Well, it's really hard because women need to survive. The majority of them in my category are solo mothers. They are alone. And they are the ones sustaining, providing for their kids, and they are providing for them with domestic work. They need it to survive. Nowadays, it is hard to go to pension. I know I am a privileged because I started to contribute to social security in '79, although I started to work even before that, a lot before, but only in '79 I managed to contribute to the social security, and that gave me the right to go to pension. And the great majority nowadays has to wait. If you don't contribute to it, you have to wait for lowest. When you are 65 years old, a woman or a man who did not contribute to the social security can, have their pension. So workers who are solo mothers, they need work. And in these houses, they are working, take care of food, taking care of people's good living, food, clean clothes and house, and taking care of animals as well, because inside a house we also take care of the animals, the dog, the cat, because we're there doing this. And nowadays, majority of houses have animals, dogs, cats, and In addition to taking care to humans, you also have to care for animals. And when you work for other people, it's hard to guarantee this good living of your family. Because when that's when we see women with 4 jobs, because you have to take care of, everyone, but who takes care of you? And now I'm part of a category who are the domestic workers. This category is hard, though they are receiving training about natural and healthy feeding. Today, with this issue of caring, we have this training, but it's really hard when when I was talking about feeding, healthy feeding. I said I come from a land where we have vatapá, caruru, heavy food, spicy food, and it's hard for us to readapt and change this feeding thing. The sugar, the brown sugar, and not the white sugar. The cake in my house, when we buy sugar and when we use the brown sugar, because I have diabetes, and then I buy the brown sugar and try to teach the younger ones to adapt to this sugar. And no, I don't want it. Look how milk is. Look how the juice is. This is a re-education. You change the mentality, and it's not easy. But we have been doing this, the struggle for equality, and we also want this reduction of the working load so that we have more time to take care of ourselves and our families. This construct, all of this that was set up, it's not easy. It depends a lot on a change in mentality and on us being united to discuss it each day. And this events team is, very fortunate in bringing this discussion here. But that's what I have to say. Thank you. I want to thank Floopy for allowing this gathering, beautiful gathering, and organize it. I think it was an initiative from Audrey, who really asked to insert this debate here and this feeding issue. Maybe because of your work, political work, you talk about food, children in Paris. But how can we make so with popular classes that cannot access this kind of food? Parents that sometimes, lost this contact, Yes, there's a lot of things. I don't have much time, but it's something that, regarding what Bella said, now, within the agriculture system, we produce 150% of the food that is necessary to feed each person on Earth. So today we produce 1.5 times what we need to feed each person on Earth. However, 900 million people are in hunger, and other people just, waste. So there is a problem. There are many reports, UN reports regarding health services, food, many research reports showing that not only today we produce a lot with agrochemicals, but nowadays, with 8 billion people, we could produce organics for feeding everyone on the planet, and we could also do it. We could produce 11 billion more. So the hunger, the difficulty to access a better quality of food, it's a political issue. It's something that is related to political choices. we try to sustain a countryside agriculture that, you know, preserves ecosystem, the health of the workers, the land workers, but we have a whole system of agrochemicals and agro-industrial that does not want to hear about the development of this agriculture. So I know I don't want to teach Brazilians, but I know that Brazil is a country that is under the domination of the agrochemical and agro industry. And I like your country. I know your country. I love this country because it reminds me of mine, Martinique. And I am really shocked because millions of Brazilians still feel hunger, although Lula's intervention, while Brazil exports and deforests to plant soy, to plant sugarcane, and sugarcane transforms into agrofuels that go to biodiesel, and soy goes to the pigs in Europe. So I don't understand why we don't make a choice of feeding each Brazilian correctly. Why do we export food to pigs in Europe? I don't understand this. This is not possible. What I would like you to remember is that we have the possibility today to feed each human being correctly with a very proper and suitable agricultural system. And if we don't do it, it's because we have this political and economic choice. So regarding tradition,
there are two ways of action for me: to allow the sustainable eating to be spreaded so that we can have a collective access. We have organic food, 60%. We have many indications of positive results for the health of this kind of organic eating. So food, the meal where children will have vegetables, etc., food and some products from another time. So for the ones who have more money, and the other side, the fact that we install in the school restaurants or in the restaurants in the city some places for sustainable eating, because Paris is a city in which people that have financial means, they are going to find anywhere organic business or organic stores. But the ones that don't have, for example, in Brazil, I know that you have an MST store where you can find products for the sustainable eating. So we are opening 160 in the different neighborhoods in Paris, in the less favorable districts. And we also have programs like the one that we call Positive Eating, which consists in working with families that are volunteers in the neighborhoods, the more popular ones, to follow them during 8 months to help them identify the places where we can buy sustainable eating for a low price, and to teach how to cook, for example, vegetables, of course, and also the green leaves, and also to allow the conversation between these families and the organic agricultural workers. And my activity, besides making this connection in Paris, is a word that I always say, it's reciprocity. I make war with my staffs the whole day so as to never be in a position of superiority, trying to teach people this is right, this is wrong. I never talk about eating well. I always talk about eating better. So with children and with the field workers, agricultural workers, they eat as they manage to eat. So what we are trying to do is to have them eating better, to teach them and to help them eat better. So in the relationship with these families that I'm talking about, it's very important that we also learn these families' traditions. And in this program that I'm talking about, there is a moment in which families, they meet the agricultural workers that work with organic products, and sometimes they are of the middle class, and they have this difficulty, of course, paying the bills because they don't work with organic to be millionaire. So this confrontation, this encounter between these families of the agricultural works, the knowledge of one, and these families, these more impoverished families, of the cook, of the French cook, that is not from a foreign origin, this encounter create reciprocity. We have a lot to learn from each other, and also through the ones that we work for. And at the end, they also have something to learn from us. So this is something that we try to give value. And also, all parents, no matter the income, the culture, the origin, the eating habits, all parents want their children to eat better. All of them. And at the end of the day, I find more interest from these more modest families to try to understand, to try to learn how to feed better their children than these families that are in a better position because they have more income and they choose only by the price. Something expensive not necessarily is good and sustainable. The food of quality can have a normal price. So another small detail about the time. It's necessary to have time to make these changes. Unfortunately, many women, single mothers, black or not, they don't have living conditions, or even if they would like to have the time to cook for their children, they don't have this time, or they don't have the resources, you know. So that's why, once more, we go back to the politics. When I used to say about the social justice, it's necessary to stop saying that ecology is just something of the higher classes. It's when we are not involved and don't do ecology that we fragilize the ones that are most vulnerable. But when we assume this political responsibility of having an ecological understanding of society and putting social injustice everywhere, at this moment I can say that we are doing something that is going against the system. Okay, of course, we're going to receive a lot of coups, a lot of beating, but we never feel beaten. So thank you. Thank you very much. We could continue here to speak. So black women, we continue fighting. I think that this is the line that crosses all the lines that we are discussing. The black women are a people that certainly struggle, fight, and that they have the solidarity, reciprocity. Thank you very much for clearing out this issue of the environment, of the cares, of the food, and your experience. We can read now your book in French. It has been translated to French. What are we going to eat? Who is going to prepare the food? This book has been translated, and we can find our in our respective languages. Thank you very much, and let's see each other very pretty soon for more exchanges. Thank you very much.